In the halls of Oak Ridge High, where privilege and wealth seemed to follow every step, a young woman named Maria moved through her workday quietly, her every action a reflection of a dignity most didn't notice. Maria was the janitor of the school, and though her job was often unnoticed and unappreciated by the students, she carried out her duties with care and professionalism. Every morning, she would arrive early, broom in hand, to sweep the floors of the pristine hallways. The students often passed her by without a glance, too absorbed in their lives to notice her presence. But it wasn't the silence of the hallway that bothered her, it was the whispers. The whispers came from the students who felt entitled to everything. They were the rich, popular crowd, those who wore their wealth as if it was a badge of honor. Their words were sharp and cruel, aimed not at each other, but at those they saw as beneath them. And Maria, the quiet janitor, became their target. She never complained. She never raised her voice. But in her heart, the sting of their words cut deeper than they could imagine. One afternoon, as Maria was mopping the floor outside the cafeteria, a group of girls walked by, laughing as they went. They were dressed in their expensive uniforms, their hair styled to perfection, and their faces smeared with self-importance. Maria bent over the bucket, the mop in her hand as she worked diligently, her focus on getting the job done. "That's all she'll ever be," one girl said loudly, her voice dripping with disdain. "A janitor. How pathetic." The others laughed, their laughter echoing in the hallway like a chorus of mocking voices. Maria glanced up for just a moment, catching a glimpse of the girl who had spoken. Her name was Emily, the leader of the group, blonde, beautiful, and rich. The kind of girl who could make or break a reputation with a single word. Maria quickly turned her head, her face flushing with embarrassment. She had learned to ignore these comments over the years, but each one still stung. She had been mocked for as long as she could remember, first for her family's poverty, then for her job at the school. And now, as a janitor, she was the target of ridicule once again. But she had learned to keep her head down. She knew that if she showed any weakness, it would only give them more ammunition. The girls passed by, still laughing and making cruel jokes about her. Emily gave her one final sneer before turning back to the group. "She'll never amount to anything. She's stuck in that cleaning uniform forever," Emily added, her voice carrying through the hallway. Maria could feel the weight of their eyes on her as she continued her work, the mop sweeping across the floor, leaving a trail of cleanliness in its wake. Maria didn't respond. She never did. But as the girls moved out of sight, a familiar wave of sadness washed over her. It wasn't the first time she had been humiliated, and she knew it wouldn't be the last. But there was a quiet resolve in her heart, a strength that no one could see. She had been through much more than they could imagine, and though their words hurt, she refused to let them break her. The years of hardship and struggle had taught her how to survive, how to keep going even when the world seemed to turn a blind eye to her efforts. As the day wore on, Maria continued her work, the sound of the mop against the floor her only companion. But as she cleaned the hallways, she couldn't help but wonder if the girls, and everyone else at the school, would ever realize that there was more to her than just her job. She wasn't just the janitor. She was a woman with dreams, a woman who had worked hard for everything she had, a woman who had been through so much more than they would ever know. And maybe, just maybe, one day, they would see that. But for now, she would keep her head down, her heart quiet, and her mind focused on the task at hand. Because in the end, she knew that no matter what anyone thought of her, she was still capable of more than they could ever imagine. As Maria finished her cleaning and prepared to leave for the day, she could already hear the sounds of laughter and chatter in the hallway. But this time, something felt different. Maybe it was the sting of their words, or maybe it was the quiet resolve building in her chest. Either way, Maria was beginning to realize that the day was coming when she would no longer be invisible, when her worth would be seen by more than just the janitor's uniform she wore. That day was closer than she thought. Graduation day had finally arrived at Oak Ridge High, and the air was thick with excitement. The halls, usually filled with the hum of everyday life, buzzed with the noise of students and their families preparing for the big day. The rich, privileged students paraded through the school in their graduation gowns, beaming with smiles and an overwhelming sense of accomplishment. They were the stars of the day, as they had been for most of their time at Oak Ridge. The world seemed to revolve around them, and they couldn't wait to move on to the next chapter of their lives. Among the sea of graduates, there was one person who was different, a woman whose name was barely spoken in the same breath as the others. Maria, the janitor. She had been working at Oak Ridge High for as long as any of the students could remember, silently keeping the school in order while the students and staff went about their busy lives. But today, she was not just the janitor. Today, she was part of the ceremony, though no one truly understood why. As Maria walked through the halls, she was unnoticed by most of the students, the same way she had been for years. Her worn-out shoes clicked against the shiny floors, a sound that was drowned out by the excited chatter around her. She wasn't part of the celebration. She wasn't part of their world. To them, she was just a background figure, a janitor who cleaned the messes they made. But today, she had something to say. Today was the day everything would change. Maria had been called to the front stage during the ceremony, but there was no explanation as to why. To the students, it seemed like a mistake, a simple mix-up. Why is she up there? Emily whispered to her friends as they all took their seats. She's just the janitor. They must have called the wrong person. The other girls in Emily's group giggled, whispering among themselves, already making assumptions about what was going on. Some snickered, others rolled their eyes. They had mocked Maria for years, never once imagining she might be anything more than a woman who cleaned their messes. The idea that she could be part of the graduation ceremony, let alone give a speech, was ridiculous in their eyes. But Maria, dressed in her simple but neat uniform, stood tall as she walked to the podium. Her heart was calm, her mind focused. There was no anger in her, only determination. She could feel the eyes of the students on her, their judgment and mockery echoing in her ears. But she had made up her mind long ago that she wouldn't let their opinions define her. Today was her day to be seen for who she truly was. As she stood at the podium, the microphone in front of her, the room quieted. The students, most of them still unsure of why she was there, looked at her expectantly. Maria took a deep breath and began to speak, her voice steady and clear. "I know many of you are wondering why I'm here today," Maria began. Her eyes scanned the room, but she didn't look at any one person for too long. She didn't want to give anyone the satisfaction of seeing her nervousness. "I'm not a graduate. I'm not one of the students who will walk across this stage today. I'm not even one of the teachers." She paused for a moment, letting the silence fill the room. "But I am part of this school, just like each and every one of you," Maria continued. "For years, I have been here, working behind the scenes to keep things running. While you were in class, I was cleaning up after you. While you were laughing with your friends, I was scrubbing the floors beneath your feet." The students shifted in their seats, some uncomfortable, others confused. Maria's words were simple, but they carried a weight that no one had expected. She was speaking from a place of truth, a place they had never given her the chance to speak from before. For the first time in their lives, the students felt a shift, an unsettling realization that maybe, just maybe, they had overlooked something important. "I didn't choose this job for the prestige," Maria said, her voice calm but full of quiet strength. "I took this job because I needed to. I took it because I have responsibilities, a family to care for. And for a long time, I was content with it. But that doesn't mean I am less than any of you. I may not wear a cap and gown like you, but my worth is no less." A few students exchanged glances, now looking at her with a sense of respect they hadn't considered before. The mockery that had once been so easy to dish out began to feel uncomfortable. Maria wasn't just the janitor. She was a person with a story, a person who had lived a life full of challenges, sacrifices, and perseverance. Her speech wasn't long, but it was powerful. As Maria finished speaking, The room remained silent. For a few moments, no one moved. The students sat, processing her words, realizing that their assumptions about her had been completely wrong. They had underestimated her, and in doing so, they had failed to see the person standing before them. Maria's speech was a turning point. It wasn't just a surprise. It was a lesson. The students of Oak Ridge High would remember that day for the rest of their lives. The janitor, the woman they had mocked and overlooked, had just reminded them of something they had forgotten. True worth cannot be measured by wealth, appearance, or status. It's measured by who you are and what you stand for. As Maria finished her speech, the room remained eerily quiet. The students, teachers, and parents who had gathered for the graduation ceremony sat motionless, stunned by what they had just heard. There was a palpable shift in the atmosphere, an uncomfortable silence hanging in the air. The proud smiles that had adorned the faces of the rich, popular students moments before now seemed forced. They were no longer the center of attention. It was Maria, the janitor, who had taken the stage, spoken with strength, and captured everyone's attention. But no one truly understood the magnitude of her words. To them, Maria was still just the janitor. They were still processing the shock of hearing her speak so boldly in front of the entire school, but there was something they didn't know, something Maria was about to reveal. As the silence stretched on, Maria stood there, her hands still on the podium, calm and composed. She could feel the weight of their stares, the mix of confusion and newfound respect in their eyes. This was her moment, the moment she had waited for her entire life. But she wasn't done yet. There was more she needed to say, more that needed to be revealed. Some of you may be wondering. Maria began again, her voice steady, but filled with a new sense of purpose. Why I didn't mention something sooner. Something important. Something that would change how you see me. She paused, her gaze sweeping across the room. She could see the curiosity in their eyes, their anticipation growing with each word. I didn't just choose this job because I had no other option, Maria continued. I didn't choose to work as a janitor because I didn't have a future. I chose it because I wanted to make a difference in my own way. I wanted to take care of my family, my parents, and my little sister. But what you don't know about me is that I'm not just some woman who cleans your mess. I'm not just some invisible figure here to do your dirty work. The students shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their eyes widening with confusion. Maria had their full attention now, but they still didn't understand. They didn't know the truth about her. The truth that would completely alter their perception of her. I grew up right here, in this town, Maria said, her voice softening slightly as she looked out into the crowd. But unlike many of you, I wasn't born into privilege. I didn't have the luxury of fancy clothes, expensive vacations, or private tutors. I worked hard to get where I am, and it wasn't easy. I had to sacrifice a lot. But I didn't give up. I didn't let the hardships of life define me. And I'm not about to let anyone define my future based on the job I have now. The students were listening now, their earlier arrogance beginning to fade. Maria wasn't the person they had thought she was. They had assumed she was just an ordinary janitor, a woman who cleaned and worked in the shadows. But they were about to learn how wrong they were. Maria's eyes locked onto Emily, the leader of the group who had mocked her the most. Emily's face, which had once been filled with smug confidence, now held a look of uncertainty. She had been so sure of herself, so certain that Maria would never amount to anything. But now, it was clear she was facing something much bigger than she had ever imagined. I have a degree, Maria said, her voice steady and full of quiet pride. I'm not just some high school dropout. I have a degree in education, and I've spent years learning, studying, and preparing for a career as a teacher. But circumstances in my life led me to take this job as a janitor, and I chose to do so willingly to support my family. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle in. I didn't have the luxury of choosing a career in teaching right away. But I never gave up on my dream. A murmur rippled through the crowd, and Maria could see the surprise in the students' eyes. They had no idea. They had assumed that she was just someone who didn't care about her future, that she had no ambition. They had never bothered to ask her story. They had never bothered to see her as anything more than the woman who cleaned the floors they walked on. "I am the daughter of a woman who built her own business from the ground up," Maria continued, her voice growing stronger. "I know what it takes to succeed, to fight against the odds, and to make something of yourself. I am not just a janitor. I am a woman with dreams, and I will achieve them." The students were now in full attention, their previous judgments crumbling in the face of her words. Emily and her friends had no idea how to respond. The girl who had once laughed at Maria, the girl who had thought she was destined for greatness, now realized how wrong she had been. Maria wasn't just a janitor. She was a woman with an incredible past and an even more incredible future. As the students sat in stunned silence, Maria gave them one last, powerful message. Never judge someone by what they do for a living or by the clothes they wear, she said, her voice filled with emotion. We all have a story, and sometimes the people we overlook are the ones who have the greatest stories to tell. Maria stepped down from the podium, her heart pounding, but her head held high. The room remained silent for a moment before the applause began. Slowly, at first, then building into a standing ovation. It wasn't just for her courage. It was for the lesson she had just taught them all. A lesson they would never forget. The applause started slow, hesitant at first, but soon grew into a wave of admiration and respect. The students of Oak Ridge High, who had once looked at Maria with disdain, now found themselves on their feet, clapping not just for her, but for the truth she had shared so boldly. The standing ovation filled the room, echoing off the walls, resonating with something deeper than just a gesture of politeness. It was a genuine recognition of Maria's strength, her courage, and her unshakable dignity. Maria stood at the podium for a moment longer, letting the sound of the applause wash over her. She had always imagined what it would feel like to be seen, truly seen for the person she was, not just the janitor, not just the woman cleaning the floors. For the first time in her life, she wasn't invisible. She was standing in front of a crowd that understood her, a crowd that respected her, and a crowd that had learned a valuable lesson about judging others. As the applause gradually died down, Maria took a deep breath and looked out at the sea of faces in front of her. There were still some students whose expressions remained hard, still some who were too proud to let go of their arrogance. But even they couldn't deny the power of what had just happened. In that moment, Maria had shown them that real success wasn't about wealth or status, but about who you were as a person, how you treated others, and how you carried yourself, no matter the circumstances. Maria smiled softly, her heart swelling with pride. She had done it. She had stood up, not just for herself, but for every person who had ever been looked down upon, underestimated, or made to feel small. She had made her voice heard, and in doing so, she had taught these students more than any textbook could. But the lesson didn't end with her speech. As the ceremony continued, Maria could feel the weight of her words lingering in the air. She could see the students talking amongst themselves, some of them looking around, unsure of what to say or how to act. For many of them, this was a moment of reflection, a moment that would change how they viewed the world and the people around them. Maria had shown them the power of humility, the strength of perseverance, and the importance of never judging a person by their circumstances. Emily, the leader of the group that had mocked her so many times before, was no longer smiling. Her face was flushed with embarrassment, her earlier arrogance replaced by an uncomfortable silence. She had thought she knew everything, had assumed that her wealth and privilege would define her forever. But Maria had shattered that illusion with a few simple, powerful words. After the ceremony, as the students began to leave, Maria stayed behind. She wasn't in a hurry to go anywhere. She felt a strange sense of peace, knowing that she had done exactly what she needed to do. As she walked through the halls of Oak Ridge High one last time, the same halls she had cleaned for years, she couldn't help but feel a sense of closure. Her time at the school had come to an end, But her journey was far from over. She had already started planning her future, a future that was full of possibilities. Later that evening, as the sun set and the last of the students left the school, Maria received a message. It was from the school principal, Mr. Harris, who had been moved by her speech. "Maria," the message began, "I want you to know that you have inspired all of us today. What you shared was not just about your journey, but about the strength and resilience of every person who has ever been underestimated. You have reminded us all of the importance of kindness, respect, and seeing people for who they truly are. I hope you know how much your words have touched us." Maria read the message with tears in her eyes. She had never expected anything like this. She had never thought she would be the one to leave such a lasting impact. But now, in this moment, she knew that her words had made a difference. The students who had once mocked her, the people who had dismissed her as nothing more than a janitor, would remember her story for the rest of their lives. And that, she realized, was her true success. As she walked out of the school for the final time, Maria looked up at the sky. The sun was setting, casting a warm, golden glow over the horizon. She knew that her life was just beginning. She had faced countless challenges, but she had never given up. And now, as she moved forward, she would do so with her head held high, knowing that her worth was not defined by her job, her appearance, or anyone's judgment. She was more than they could ever see. In that moment, Maria realized something even more powerful. Success wasn't about the applause. It wasn't about being recognized by the world. Success was about knowing who you are, embracing your journey, and never allowing anyone to make you feel small. Maria had found that strength within herself, and now, the world would finally see it too.